Welcome. My name is Chris Ajemian. I'm the CEO and founder of CATES Tutoring Educational Services and your co-host today. On behalf of the entire CATES team and community, I hope that you, your family, and friends are all well and safe during this time. And thank you for your participation in today's webinar, especially in light of the current context. Over the past few weeks, the coronavirus pandemic has wreaked havoc on college admissions and in novel ways. Schools across the world have closed, SAT and ACT's test centers have been shuttered, and many colleges have canceled tours and orientation programs. And some colleges have even waived standardized testing requirements. What's more, the biggest decisions and disruptions may still be to come. So today I'm joined by the chairman of Edvice London, Lisa Montgomery, a dear friend and mentor who has worked in admissions for over 30 years and has seen it all from different angles. As admissions officer at University of Chicago, her alma mater, as a college counselor at the Trinity School in New York, and director of college counseling at a number of schools, including Friends Seminary in New York City, University of Chicago Lab School, the American School of London, and now at Edvice London, her private consulting practice on Finchley Road. So Lisa has presented at conferences all over the United States and Europe, and has been featured on US National Public Radio to speak on various matters related to college admissions. With such an eclectic and deep experience on both sides of the Atlantic, Lisa is not only one of the premier experts on student advising anywhere, but perhaps the most knowledgeable and certainly, that I've met on the specific challenges that UK and international students all face on the road to college admission in the United States. I'm honored to discuss where things stand with Lisa today and what the future may hold for year 12 and 13 students applying to the US. So Lisa, thank you so much for joining us. We hope you are well, yes?
Yes, I am well. I hope that you are well. I hope that everyone is well, staying healthy, staying safe, and staying sane.
Agreed. So here's our agenda for today. Some housekeeping first. I will facilitate the conversation. If you do have questions at any point in time, please ask them in the Q&A panel, which you can access by scrolling over the little toolbar for Zoom in the bottom of your screen. Additionally, while I have a slide or two to share, today's session will be run primarily as a facilitated conversation. And so for the best experience, you may want to set your screen to gallery view, which you can do by scrolling over the top right corner of your browser window and selecting gallery. And that allows Lisa and me to appear side by side on your screen. As far as format goes, we want to organize our time today around the questions pertaining to the 3 family segments that we're trying to help today. So number 1, current year 13 students, questions about waitlist, entry barriers, aid. Year 12 students, visits, fall admissions and testing, and year 11 and under, what's going to be happening for them beyond 2020. And in preparing for our talk, Lisa and I agreed on this format because we see a potential trickle-down effect that begins with year 13 students on the wait list, and that may impact younger students who may be even starting high school in the fall or upper school in the fall. And while we're happy to take a question or two during these segments, we've made time for an extended Q&A at the end. And this finally, as far as focus goes, Lisa and I also agree that most people are interested, who are on this webinar, are interested and aware of what's going on with the general COVID virus in, just in general and its impact on admissions. So we're going to really keep that assumption in mind, and we're going to focus on providing you with primarily with our insight and actionable strategies to, potentially ones that you haven't really heard before, so you know what to do going forward. Okay, and with that, I'm going to stop the share here. And so we will go to side-by-side view, and I will go full screen on this. Perfect. Great. So, Lisa.
Yes.
Would love to start off with year 12 students, year 13 students, and really kind of talk about what are some of the challenges that they're facing right now, with the wait list. So, it seems like the entire problem, given its timing, starts with the wait list, and this year's wait list and the decisions made or not in the next 12 months, that's going to begin a domino effect that could last for years. So I'd love to hear your insights on, year 13 students, especially those on the wait list.
Yeah. So every year universities put lots of kids on the wait list, thousands of kids on the wait list, far more than they have any intention ever of taking off the wait list. The reason to keep a really long wait list is that it gives you a lot of optionality when it is time to take some students off the wait list. You've got students from all 50 states and dozens of foreign countries. You've got male students, female students. You have students with different academic interests, different extracurricular options. So having nice long wait lists is not news. That's always been the case. Wait lists are not ranked. So we don't know what the universities are going to do. This year, though, not knowing what the universities are going to do is, of course, the name of the game.
Right.
We think that there's a very strong chance that there will be more waitlist action than there's been in the past because A, the admitted students might have reason not to accept their offers. When families' finances become less predictable and less stable, inevitably, they have to look at the enormous expense of sending their students to university. Is this the right time? Or should they defer for a year? We think there's going to be a real uptick in the number of students who ask to defer their offer of admission for a number of reasons. But if they defer in greater numbers than the university had anticipated, and they always anticipate some, then they're going to have to go deeper to the wait list than they have in the past.
And for this year, would you actually recommend students who are currently on the wait list even request a deferral?
Different universities have different policies about waitlisted students. If you are offered a spot off of the wait list, some universities have a policy that says you may not then defer that offer. But that varies university to university. You've really got to do your homework about this. If you're on a wait list somewhere that's very interesting to you, the first thing you have to do is tick the box that they gave you that says, yes, I want to stay on the wait list. And then you need to follow that up unless you're specifically instructed not to. With more information, you're basically writing what we call a wait list love letter. I love you. I want you to admit me, even though you didn't admit me in the first place. I still love you. I'm not mad. So you got to give them a little more information, give them an update on what you've been doing since you applied, make it clear that you know the institution and why you're a good fit for it. Some universities will give you a very specific box to fill in that might only have room for 50 words or 100 words. Others, they'll let you upload anything. Some ask you specifically not to upload anything. So following instructions is critical. Universities care a lot about that. Following instructions is a third grade skill, and you ought to have mastered that skill by now. But if you want a spot off the wait list, this might be your year, but you've got to pursue it aggressively. Don't wait.
So we were talking about this over the weekend as we were preparing for this conversation. And I thought you said something really kind of fascinating about the deferral requests might be, rejected or denied more so in the past, because you said something about schools not being able to afford to fill both 2020 and 2021 cohorts with the same cohort. Can you say a little bit more about that? I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, every year the universities assume that some people are going to request a gap year. Some students request deferral for very specific reasons. Mandatory military service is one of them for students in a number of countries. Other students will request a deferral simply to take a gap year, to have an experience outside of the normal route of education. So they account for that when they admit students. They know they're going to move maybe 40 to 100 students into the next cohort, and those kids will be starting in the following fall, not the fall that you're about to have. But if the number of kids requesting deferrals goes way up, I mean, it really balloons, 200, 300, 400, do they really want to give away that many seats?
Right.
Fall of 2021, basically taking those seats away from kids who are in year 12 right now, and putting too many kids from the single cohort that is year 13 into these two classes. We don't think they're going to want to do that. We think they're going to want to be careful about not overfilling fall 2021 because it's going to be discouraging to the kids who are in year 12 right now. Nobody wants to fill two classes with one cohort. So if you think you want to defer, if you've already got a spot that you want somewhere and you're considering deferral, you need to get busy thinking about that right now, because the request needs to move soon. Do not wait until their deadline date for that.
And I think you were saying earlier, a few days ago when we were talking about it, that some of your students have already made the request and been accepted.
They have. So I've had students who have already requested that their admission be deferred to fall of 2021. And so far, all of those requests have been honored. It's a short list, Chris. We're talking about 5 kids.
Right, still.
But I have other students who are batting the idea around, and for a lot of reasons. Some of it is finances, there's that. Some of it is just coronavirus. Um, like, do they really want to be traveling to the US right now? Some of it is, will they be able to travel to the US right now? What if there are travel restrictions either in their home country or from the US? Then there are kids who are worried about getting a student visa.
Right.
Embassy
So actually, that's a great
closed.
way to, that's a great transition point, because I also want to talk about the barriers to U.S. entry for international students. We're seeing this with boarding school students, we're seeing with university students, who are currently here, who have stayed in the U.S. for fear of getting back in.
Yeah.
What are your insights? What would be your advice to international students, who are in year 13, who are thinking about, what to do about the fall with respect to travel visas and other barriers to entry to the United States?
Anything that you can do now needs to be done. This is not the year to wait. This is the year to take action immediately. So if you need a student visa, that visa is processed by your university. They're the ones who start the whole process. They don't start that process until you accept the offer of admission. First, you have to say, yes, I'm coming. So that decision needs to be made sooner rather than later. The usual day to accept an offer is May the 1st. Some universities are pushing that date back till June the 1st to give families more time to make decisions given the uncertainties. But if you're an international student and you need a student visa and you wait until June 1st to tell them you're coming, that's when the process commences of processing this visa. What are the chances that you're going to be able to get an appointment with your embassy in time?
Right.
When we've got embassies that are going to be closed for a month, maybe 2, and they're going to have to take all the people who were meant to have an appointment, push those back. I've heard that in China right now, you can't get an appointment before November.
November.
I don't have that confirmed, but so I have been told. And if that is the case, then if you are a student coming from China, what does it mean to start in the fall?
Right. Do you think they'll prioritize international students who are coming to the U.S. to study as far as visas go?
Wouldn't that be nice?
Very, very nice.
I love the idea. I love the idea of them doing that, but I don't think we can count on that. When people need a visa or need the services of their embassy, they need those services, and they need them for a variety of reasons. Passports that are expiring, newborns who need to get passports. There are a lot of things that the embassy does. And are students starting university in the US more important? I'm not sure.
Right. So it's interesting because I've been thinking a lot about whether or not schools are going to be open in the fall. In fact, today in Maine, where I am, we learned from our superintendent that the state commissioner has said to them, prepare for school to be closed the rest of the year, and start
the rest of the calendar year, you mean?
Well, the rest of the school year.
I see.
Okay? Start to plan for your strategies over the summer to help keep your students ready, because when they come into school in September on day 1, they want to be, you want to mitigate any losses, but we should also be prepared not to go back to school until November this year. So with all of that, assuming that students are, potentially going to be trapped out of school, whether it's, K through 12 or even colleges. We actually received a question from Philippe in London, and he's the father of a year 13 student. And he was asking, what meaningful experiences can students hope to engage in, assuming restrictions are in place? So if, you are someone who's been accepted to a college in America and school may not be starting off, if that were the case, what do you think schools would be doing about that to engage their students meaningfully?
Well, first of all, every university will make the most enormous effort to start in person in the fall if they can. They simply cannot afford to do anything else. Right. So if they can start in the fall, they're going to start in the fall. They appreciate that the experience of sitting in your bedroom taking a class online is nothing like the experience of being on campus.
Absolutely.
Students have always had options for remote education, online education. You choose brick and mortar institutions for a reason, and that has everything to do with the experience of being there. If the universities are thinking hard about how they can get things rolling in person, and I think they're trying to do a lot. If they cannot, and we can go back to talking about how they're thinking about keeping things rolling along in person, but if you cannot, they're going to move everything that they can to a Zoom platform or whatever online platform works for their institution. They simply have a serious economic driver to have people paying tuition.
Right.
I think their willingness to say, okay, we're going to have no students for the fall for the very first term. We're going to give up all that tuition money. Not a chance. Not a chance.
So actually a quick unrelated question on this. So we received a question from a student named Rebecca in Naples, and she's an undergraduate student living, living abroad, obviously, and she's also a transfer applicant. She's currently in university, and her question was, how will coronavirus impact transfer international students and their applications?
Good question. I'm not sure that it would have quite as significant an impact as it might have for students who are going to start their first year of university, because so many universities guarantee housing to first-year students, and transfer students are not always guaranteed housing. A huge issue for starting in the fall is going to be housing. If you're going to start, but you want to implement some sort of social distancing, universities are already thinking about how they can take dorm rooms that are designed for 3 students or 2, turn those all into singles. How do you start spreading kids out in the dorms? How do you create more space for student accommodation? Transfer students could be less impacted by that consideration because they often are not guaranteed housing. So I expect the transfer pools to function in the same way.
Got it. So you mentioned before, finances and aid, and I wanted to talk about aid packages for current year 13 students.
Yep.
So, how's the virus going to affect aid packages? What questions should people be asking? Should people be expecting, their aid packages to either be rescinded or adjusted? Thoughts on that, Lisa?
Adjusted, but I think in a positive way. I think universities are really devoted to financial aid. Rescinding a financial aid package in our business is criminal. It's immoral. I mean, people they're just not going to do that. Yeah. They will do everything in their power to provide students with the finances that they need to accept their offer. If you've been offered a place at an institution, they want you to accept the offer. Now, the richest institutions can go a long way towards adjusting, but they're not going to naturally adjust for you. So to the parents who filed those forms, or the students, if you filed the form yourself, you need to go back and look at what you told them your financial situation looked like. What was the picture that you painted when you filed those forms, and how has that picture changed? You cannot expect a university to guess that you have lost your job, that family members have been ill, that wages have been lost. Make no assumptions. Talk to the financial aid office, and by talk, I mean send an email, send something with real detail about how your situation, your family's situation has changed. They will try to negotiate if they can. They really will do their best, but you have to keep in mind, their budgets are not unlimited.
Right.
So this again is a moment where I would encourage people to act speedily. Don't wait and think about it.
And how might this trickle down to next year, as far as, like, say, full pay students, scholarship students?
I don't like what I'm going to say about this.
You don't have to.
It makes me unhappy.
Brutal facts are brutal.
Right. It makes me unhappy. But if universities feel compelled this year to increase financial aid budgets, to make sure that the students that they've offered spots to have the resources that they need to attend, I think it's inevitable that that's going to impinge on financial aid budgets for next year. Right. I think they're going to have less money. Well, they're going to have less money for everything, but they're going to have less money available for next year. It could skew the decision-making towards students who are full payers.
Right.
So that they can provide to the students that they do fund the most generous packages that they can. Mm-hmm. It's always a question for universities. You can either fund some students incredibly generously, or you can fund far more students less generously. How do you think about that? Right. They don't want to make offers that they know are just not going to do the job. If your family needs $50,000 assistance and they offer you 20, it feels insulting, and the universities get that. So those that can afford to cover your full need will do that. Some places don't cover full need, and they're aware of that, and students should have been aware of that when they applied. So I think hopefully we'll be okay for kids this year. Next year's class, I am afraid, I think is going to favor families that can pay.
So along those lines, we got a question from Debo, a graduate student in Nigeria. And he was asking, well, how do we access funding? What do, not just undergraduate, what can graduate school applicants expect with financial aid next year? Any thoughts on that, Lisa?
It completely depends on what we mean by graduate school. Professional schools tend to have much less financial aid than
Right.
PhD programs, for example. So if you're applying to business school, medical school, law school, unless you're applying to medical school at, NYU, which has, gotten rid of tuition for its medical students, but that happened before coronavirus. That's an unrelated decision, and all of our applause to the university for that decision. But for professional schools, your chances of getting financial aid were limited in the first place, and they're sure as heck not getting better. If what you're doing is applying to a master's program or a PhD program, it could be interesting to see if they limit the number of students that they're going to take. Students who are finishing PhD programs this year, right now, they'd be defending their dissertations right now.
Right.
And now potentially walking into a job market where there are no jobs. Universities are surely putting on hiring freezes. There's no question about it. It's one of the quick ways to respond to a financial crisis. You put on a hiring freeze. So you're going to have all the freshly minted PhDs with no job market.
Right.
Would you then bring in a whole nother class to start down this road when the trickle down there could be serious? You could have two cohorts of PhD students in a job market that's dried up.
Right.
That's going to be tough. So I'd be cautious if you're applying to a graduate program and you're going to need lots of financial aid to survive that. This is not going to be a great year.
Gotcha. Well, we appreciate that insight. That's fascinating. So one of the things I wanted to talk about today with you was the idea of school visits, which is always a very good sort of transition topic for year 13, year 12 students. So on that, what are the major issues that year 13 students on the wait list, but also year 12 students who have yet to even visit schools, what are the questions that they should be asking, right? What are your insights on what's going to happen with that? What are your thoughts on virtual tours we keep hearing about? Is that going to be enough? Thoughts, Lisa?
Yeah, of course it's never enough. The experience of actually being in a place is meaningful.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as, us having a conversation here on Zoom versus us, being together in the same room. We know it's not the same. If we thought it was exactly the same, then brick and mortar universities would struggle to defend their existence. Right. So of course it's not the same thing, but there's going to be no excuse this year not to use every resource that's available to you. So we hope that admissions people will start traveling again in the fall and be able to present their stories in person. But let's say that doesn't happen. Students are going to have to be more proactive. They're going to have to make more decisions on their own. So universities are absolutely loading up more content onto their websites. Not everybody, but a lot of them are. Virtual tours, ways to connect with current students, ways to connect directly with admissions officers, enhanced tours, information sessions that are now online, some of which are online live, like the conversation we're having now.
They're live streams, yeah.
Yeah, like they're basically doing live streams. You can ask questions. And that's great. You've simply got to do that stuff. You owe it to yourself so that you can make the best decisions possible. And the universities, of course, always track who visits. Well, this is your chance to visit. This is a way to demonstrate interest to the university so that when it does come time to apply, they can see that you've done everything in your power to learn about them, which makes them more inclined to think seriously about you.
And you were saying the other day, and I found this fascinating, that it seems like admissions offices across the US are being a bit more proactive, a bit more open to speaking with students one-on-one after going to those sort of online info sessions. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the sense I'm getting, that a number of websites are giving you an option to click and sign up to talk directly to an admissions officer. They're also offering the same kind of option for talking to a current student, which is a very different kind of a conversation. But if you're going to talk to an admissions officer, you have to remember that you need to be prepared for that conversation. Although it might not be an interview exactly, I think we can all agree that every time you meet someone, you walk away with an impression. You form an impression. And so if you're going to say, yes, I want to talk to an admissions officer, you need to be prepared. You need to have done their online info session if they had one. You've got to have taken the virtual tour. You have to have a list of questions. You are the driver. Right. You can't sign up for that talk and then expect to just sit back and have information handed to you. It's really the reverse. So you're in charge now. Make sure that you are making a superb impression, have a number of questions. and not the kind of questions you should have been able to answer yourself. Don't say, you know, how's the political science department? What do you expect them to say, right? They're not going to say, oh, actually, it's kind of rubbish. You know, that's not going to happen. You need to ask pointed questions. It's a good chance, though. You'll get better information. It's sort of a private information session.
It is. And also, too, obviously, the questions that you should be asking are not ones that are answered by the website.
Exactly. You're meant to know already what's on the website and then asking questions that riff off of that. So yeah, you need to be as well informed as you can possibly be. This has to be an active exercise. I mean, of course, in the past, visiting campuses was active, but sitting in an info session or being on a tour was actually more a passive activity, right? They're feeding information to you and you're deciding what you think about it. Now you need to take a more proactive stand.
Right, and we received a question along these lines from a student named Luke. He's a year 12 student in London, and he was asking, you know, how do we know what these schools are like? You know, if we can't visit them, and obviously Google Images or Google Maps are, you know, not a replacement for it. I think one of the things that, you know, we were talking about, you know, the other day was, you know, to me at least, you know, in general in life, it's not, you know, where you are, it's who you're with.
Right.
And the faculty and the students, those are the people that are really the lifeblood of the university.
Yeah.
So, you know, all the different things that you're recommending about connecting with faculty and students or admissions, that's become like even more important now, you know, because we don't have those opportunities to actually do that. So, you know, the buildings are great, Google Images is great, but it's all just sort of window dressing and architecture. It's about the people, right? The kind of people you want to be around for 4 years.
Yep, I absolutely agree with you. If you have a chance to talk to a current student, you should take that opportunity. You have to take it though with a grain of salt. You're talking to one student, right? You can't take that one example and say, well, that's it, all the students are like this. But you should be doing everything you can to look at the extracurricular and social side of the campus. Do they have fraternities and sororities? Is that a big deal? That tells us something about what the vibe of the place would be like. Is big time sports part of what they do? You know, if you go to a UCLA, a USC, a Duke, you know, you can be going to huge, fabulous sporting events. Most of the big state universities, of course, also are huge on sports. If you want that to be part of your experience as a fan, then that's wonderful. If you want part of your experience to be that you actually get to play basketball, then do not go to UCLA unless you are 7 feet tall. You will not play basketball for UCLA. So you have to think about, you know, what kind of relationship do you want to have with things like sports, fraternities, sororities? What about student organizations? What about volunteer opportunities? Are there tons of them? You can usually get a pretty effective list of student groups off of the websites. And if you troll through those, I know the list can be really long, but long is good news. You can see a little bit about how it sort of swings. Does it lean one way or another? So dig around, talk to students, talk to your families, talk to alums from these institutions to try to get the best sense that you can.
And I'll add one last point to that, which is, you know, at least in my experience, I find it's always, if it's possible, to talk to, you know, no less than 3 people.
Yeah.
You know, 3 students, 3 professors, 3 this, 3 that. It just gives you enough to sort of run some like thematic analysis, if you will, to get a sense as to what really, you know, the essence is, you know, at that school or what's going on in that particular context.
Yeah, so, I agree.
So fall 2020 application cycle, we got tons of questions on this from people for the event. So, you know, obviously, you know, there's a lot of questions involved. You know, summer programs are being canceled. Some schools are getting rid of grades and doing pass-fail for the semester. There have been some people asking about whether early decision or early action are going to happen next year. You know, what are your insights on the 2020 application cycle? How do you think colleges are going to consider spring grades? You know, will there be ED next year? You know, again, the gap year conversation comes up, and then any, you know, insight or advice you may have on what might, you know, be, you know, important to consider or think about for the 2021 full application cycle. Yeah.
If I could just reiterate, this is crucially important. The universities absolutely must yield a class, both for this fall and for next fall. They have to yield a class. It's crucial to the way that they function as an institution, to their financial well-being and health. They've got to have a freshman class. We think the universities are going to be generous in the way that they think about kids whose courses might have moved to all pass-fail grading, or who in some other way have changed the way that students are evaluated for the spring. They can't afford to simply take everyone whose grades have gone through some sort of a change and say, well, then you guys are out of the running. They're just not going to do that. They can't do that. This is going to absolutely favor students who have been extremely consistent academically.
Right.
So if you have been an excellent student all the way up until now, and now your grades have changed to a pass-fail system or some other system that's not the same kind of quality grades you've received in the past, as long as you've been extremely consistent, there's every reason to believe that you would have performed in the same way. Right. Now, if your school goes back to session actively or starts to actively deliver quality grades in the fall, those grades, as always, will be absolutely crucial. That was true before COVID-19 and it's true now. So working hard, making sure that the first term of your final year is super successful academically is going to be crucial. But they're going to work with it. They can't afford to penalize millions of students whose grading system has changed.
Gotcha. And so that goes for the GCSEs, the A-levels, as well as the American system.
I really do think so. I think that they're going to be open to what schools are telling them. It's going to be also a good year for students who go to schools that perhaps send a lot of students to the US and so have familiarity between the admissions officers and the people at the school that cover higher education and advising there. So yeah, there are some people it's going to favor, I suppose, but I think that's going to be more marginal than people might imagine it's going to be. I do not think that US universities are going to say, forget Europe, forget Asia, you guys are out. That's not going to happen.
So it's funny because I think one of the people, one of the student groups, if you will, that's going to be affected, by all this are what I call the heroes of testing. The students who don't really work that hard throughout the year. When you have their summative exams, whether it's their GCSEs or their A-levels or whatever, what have you.
Yeah.
And they kind of use that event to really kind of bring it all together and sort of deliver on test day. Those students are, they got some things to think about.
I think that's a big disadvantage this year. This is not going to be the year for kids who pull it all together when it's time to take a test and who on testing day far outperform their teachers' expectations. That's not the year for them, folks. Sorry.
We do have some students who put some questions in who are coming out of the American system, even though they're overseas. And there's one here from a student, high school student, a school student named Bob in the EU. And he was asking, what effect do you see the disruption having on AP tests? And how do you expect colleges to consider AP scores, especially because the AP tests have been altered because of the virus. They're now being done at home. How are schools potentially, how can we expect them to, they're looking at that? How can we expect them to actually consider the scores as legitimate? Thoughts on that, Lisa?
Yeah, the AP exam results are used by US universities largely to grant credit or for placement into classes. Submission of AP exam results is not required by the process. So how well you're performing in class is crucial. It's always great to have a wonderful set of AP results to back up those excellent grades that your teachers were giving you. So a nice fat stack of 5s on the APs is great because it presumably confirms that the A's you have been earning in class were legitimate grades.
Perfect.
And what do they do with it? I don't know if they're going to give credit or change crediting. I don't know. Because the AP exams are going to be weird. I was just told today that they've set up a timeline for when the exams are going to be given. Kids in Asia are going to get crushed. They're going to have to take their exams in the middle of the night.
So it's funny right now, one of my students who's at a Horace Mann in New York City, she's currently in Belgium right now, and her school is still working online, but for the time difference, she's doing classes at weird times. And we were talking too about, some friends of yours who were from Hong Kong and doing, when they're in London, trapped in London for a few weeks doing classes, at midnight or something like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Their classes were synchronous, they were online, and, we're talking about pretty young kids. The family that stayed with me while they were trapped in London out of Hong Kong, there was a 10-year-old up at midnight, sitting there at the dining room table, getting ready to take classes, and his 13-year-old brother right behind him. And
in your house.
And in my house, I was happy to have them. But, sort of so what? And I think the AP folks are thinking the same thing. They're going to start exams as early in the morning in Hawaii as 6 a.m. They have, posted the UK times, which are starting, depending on which sessions you're taking, 4 p.m., 6 p.m., 8 p.m. But what does that mean for people who are further into Europe and then into Asia?
Right.
I don't think we can control it, guys. Does that mean that universities are going to be less convinced about the exam results because there are so many mitigating factors that could have taken a really, really strong student and made for a less strong outcome because they had to start their exam at 3 o'clock in the morning?
Right.
Yes.
Right. I wonder too, with respect to this question, this just came to mind, is if, the consistency with the AP score, I mean, really any of these sort of summative exams, consistency with the AP score with respect to your grades in school, if that's only going to kind of reinforce whether it's, you're getting A's in your AP classes or B's in your AP classes, and therefore like say 5s and 3s in your tests, if that's going to only help to solidify the validity of your grades as well as your scores, but maybe for students where there's a big discrepancy between grades and their AP scores, maybe those students might get, I don't know, extra consideration or whatnot. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do think it's going to be trickier where there is inconsistency between the grades you get in class and the results that you get on the exam. This is going to be a really important year for people who are filling out the common application to think carefully about how to use the additional information section.
Yes.
The more information you provide universities, the more clearly they can understand the picture. If you were taking your exams at 4 o'clock in the morning, tell them. Absolutely. Right? Why wouldn't you? You should tell them that. If you yourself have been in quarantine in your bedroom all alone for 14 days, you should tell them that. If there are issues that have had an impact on your education, your schooling, your family, don't hold back. Now, what you don't want to do is write essays that sound like you're whining about something. Everybody is suffering, but you can provide context without tone. The AP exams that I took, were delivered at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I believe that had an impact on my capacity to deliver my best work.
Right.
That's not whining, that's just a statement.
No, you're providing more context, more facts.
Right. So keep track of all this stuff, guys. Don't forget it. Make sure that you have kept a decent log of what's going on and what situations you think are having an impact, either positively or negatively, on you and your schooling, so that information can be provided on the application.
So we've talked a little bit now about academics, and you've made it very, very clear how it's important to stay consistent, keep working. Your grades more so than ever are going to be important during this time. But we did receive a question from a student in London. Her name is Sarah, and she was asking, how do we keep up our extracurricular profile during this time? Thoughts on that?
I know it is so hard, especially for athletes.
Right.
Athletes, choirs. Drama kids, right? The spring musical is not going to happen. This is tough. What we are encouraging students to do is to ask themselves, all right, what are the things that really matter most to me? What are the great loves of my life? And if that is, the environment, for example, then go online, find courses that you can take that speak to those interests. You should be taking those opportunities to learn more about the things that you care about. So if you are a great lover of drama, there's a website called Broadway HD, which is for a free 7-day trial. You can watch all these Broadway shows. National Theatre here in London is streaming things. There are, for free, there are museum tours that you can take that are also free of charge. You need to think about how to pursue the things that you care about in the absence of pursuing them in person. So if what you love to do is cook, here's your chance. Let your mom and dad teach you a little bit about cooking, start making dinner for the family. There are a lot of things that you can do, and it might not have all the joy that it had before, but to do nothing is actually the worst response to this. Doing nothing is not one of your options.
Yeah, I mean, just sort of 2 quick points on this. One of the things that we're doing more and more with our students, especially in New York, is this idea of helping them develop their passion projects or ventures. And we're now, looking at the COVID-19 crisis as an opportunity to take those different projects and figure out how to deliver them virtually. And what's kind of nice about that, necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Yeah.
And so they're now taking these projects that may have been writing workshops or might have been something in the community, and they now have to learn, not advanced, but basic coding skills or how to
Yeah,
develop a website. And so in many ways, it's actually an opportunity to develop, new skills and to develop like new competencies that are going to benefit you in many, many ways and also benefit other people, especially. And we were talking about this yesterday. I think that every single student who's going to be going through this application process this year, next, maybe even beyond, they're going to have to answer a question. And I've drafted it as if I was the Common App. And here it is, how do you see, how did you use your time during coronavirus to stay on top of your studies,
yep,
deepen your personal interests, try new things, and most importantly, help others in need?
absolutely. This is a chance for you to think as creatively as possible about the impact that you can have. So I have a student who's really interested in mental health of adolescents. So
Yeah.
she has started a blog called Quarantine,
Ah,
and she's inviting students
I love
to
that.
I know, I do too. Very clever.
Yeah.
Inviting students to share their stories, share photos, be there for each other, right? Because we all know that, our mental health is improved by sharing our stories with people and connecting with other people. So, she was thinking about doing that. I have another student whose group at school that used to go visit a home for the elderly can no longer do that. Of course, they can't go face to face. So instead, they're talking to the people who manage that care home and asking them, can we set up these kinds of Zoom meetings? Is there some way for us to communicate online? In the absence of that, can we do grocery shopping for you? Can we write letters to everybody and deliver the letters, right? You can write a cheerful note. You can draw a picture. Can we do pharmacy runs? What can we do to help these folks who we would under other circumstances have come once a week to visit? How can we take that time and still use it to the benefit of those people? You've got to do it. You've got to try.
Got to do it. Last topic for us. Standardized tests.
Oh,
We're on different sides of the fence on this.
we're on very different sides of the fence on standardized tests. Yeah, I wish they would all go away.
I understand that, they're very useful, in some respects, but as far as the testing requirements go, Lisa,
Yep.
particularly now that some of the schools have, in fact, most schools have eliminated SAT subject tests, including MIT and Caltech, and the UCs were going to eliminate the essay this year, and then recently went test optional.
Yep.
Will GCSE and A-level predictions now be based, we know it'll be based on previous coursework. Are they going to be, even more important? What are your thoughts about standardized tests, how schools are, waiving the requirements this year, and how they may actually impact the importance of all the other pieces in the application?
Yep. Well, yes, we're seeing a lot of universities electing now to go test optional, either as a pilot program for a year, because they know that this class, the year 12s, have been highly impacted by the situation, or they're going in for a 3-year pilot, or they're just dumping them all together. Anytime you take away a data point, then the value of all the other data points rises. Right. So in the absence of standardized testing, how well you perform in school, it becomes ever more crucial. If universities have fewer ways to think about you, then they have to take the ways they do have, and those ways all have more weight. They're going to carry more in the process. So your school, if you go to a British system school, will be assigning you grades for GCSE, and for A-level, they will then go to a governmental agency, which is ultimately going to make decisions about whether or not your school handled that fairly. The teachers are being asked at GCSE to rank students within each of the grade bands.
Ranking.
They're ranking them. So
wow.
If a teacher has given you a 9, you and 5 other members, let's say, of your history class, the teacher is being asked to rank those students. Ultimately, we do think that the government will decide then based on the past performance at your school in the last year, or an aggregate of a year, 2 or 3 years, or 5, I don't know how many years they're going to use. They're going to look and see if the grades that your teachers have assigned seem in keeping with the performance of students from your school before. So you don't want to be near that grade boundary. You will never know the ranking as a student. Teachers are prohibited from telling you what the ranking is. You only know whether or not you have done everything in your power. That's all you know. So do that. So yeah, standardized testing, it's still going to exist at some places. I don't think everybody's going to drop it. But for anyone who does, you've got to put more emphasis on the other work that you've done in school, whether that's grades for your exams, your EPQ if you're writing an EPQ, an extended essay if you're working on that. You need to be knocking it out of the park for any of the data points that the universities have, for sure. No forgiveness on that this time around.
So just you had mentioned a couple of the sort of test optional schools. I just want to just share with people, the schools at least there was referencing, there are some schools that are doing 1-year pilots or just temporarily 1 year. The UC system is one, Vassar College, Boston University, Case Western, and also, prior to this start of this session, Lisa, you said that Williams, as well as Amherst, two of the top liberal arts colleges in the country for 1 year as well. And then Davidson, Rhodes, and Tufts, they're doing 3-year pilots, and then they're going to revisit their policies in 3 years. Is that right? Anything else? Any like sort of schools of significance that I'm missing, or?
None that come immediately to mind. This is such a fast-moving target that anything that I say to you today is going to be incomplete as of tomorrow. So things are changing really, really rapidly.
At some point.
Yeah, right. The universities are making decisions all the time on a whole host of fronts. Admissions is making decisions that they hope will keep their applicant pools robust.
Right.
That will not disadvantage students who are already facing hosts of disadvantages and hosts of insecurities around all of this stuff. You guys don't know what the heck is going on, and they don't want students to be discouraged from applying at all because of that. And I think they also, in the most generous possible way, would really just like to be reassuring that they're on your side and they're not going to contribute, if they can help it, to barriers to entry. So expect a lot more testing requirements to fall in the next week or so. And if this carries on further, if College Board cancels June date, if things continue to cancel, you'll see more universities, I think, stepping up to the plate, getting on the side of the student and killing off standardized testing.
So this is interesting. I was actually reading an Inside Higher Ed article this morning, and it had a statement from the College Board. And because I've been getting questions about our SAT and ACT adding dates, and so I wanted to kind of touch upon it for people. So according to the College Board, and I quote, we're working to address testing access issues caused by the coronavirus pandemic, and will provide additional SAT testing dates and increased capacity as soon as the public health situation allows. If unfortunately, schools cannot reopen this fall, we're pursuing innovative means to ensure all students can still take the SAT this fall. Now, I know the College Board was rolling out the August test date overseas this year, which is both an SAT as well as an SAT subject test date.
Right.
So we've already, they're already adding test dates, but I thought one interesting development with this, in connection with the ETS, Educational Testing Service, which is the creator of the SAT, whereas the College Board administrates it. ETS has temporarily introduced the GRE, which is the SAT for grad school, for those who don't know the exam, in an online format that you can actually take in your home under the supervision of a remote proctor on video. So I've been thinking about, especially when I'm reading about the College Board talking about innovative practices for delivering the SAT, could the SAT, again, it's an ETS test, but administered by the College Board, could they offer, online at-home testing? I mean, I wouldn't expect it because of security issues, but clearly it's not impossible. And I know too that, and this is really my question for you, Lisa, is that, I know that non-native English speakers can now take an English proficiency test online, the Duolingo test, either in place of or as a supplement to the TOEFL, and that colleges do accept it. So are colleges looking at the Duolingo test? I guess they're looking at it, as a legitimate measure, even as being taken in the home. Is that right?
Yeah, no, they are. But, taking a Duolingo test, sort of live online like this, if you're trying to measure someone's capacity to communicate effectively in English, is actually perhaps something that's less easy to game than sitting and taking a written test. Sure. So I can see why they see the real legitimacy of that. An SAT that's taken in your home, for the minute I remain skeptical about that. I'm concerned about how deeply it disadvantages kids who don't have excellent technology, excellent consistent technology in their home. How are they going to provide a proctor for 1 million kids taking the test?
I don't know. Another thing too, and I didn't mention this, but I will now because it came up, is that for the GRE that ETS is doing online, you have to have a PC.
Oh, right.
Most people have a Mac device. I mean, I don't know the actual numbers, but I know in most of the situations when I'm working with a younger person, they usually have a Mac. So
Right.
in that respect, that's also a barrier as well. So,
I
but
think it's a significant barrier. They can't expect you to go out and buy a new computer to take
of
this
course
test.
not. Of
That's
course not.
absurd.
Yeah. But one of the things I've been telling students about the exams is, I don't think the June test is going to happen personally. So I've been recommending, that students should still be preparing for it as if it's going to happen until further notice. But I would think that the earliest time that we see an administered exam is probably the July ACT. And so in that respect, I've been advising students, even if they're SAT students, to consider the ACT because it's also on the computer. And, those test results come back with a 2-day turnaround. And then, they're also rolling out the section retakes in the fall. So that's going to help you with early decision, early action, because you'll have your scores faster. But the other thing too, which is actually an advantage for international students over the US students, is that ACT has been doing computer testing for a couple of years already. So, I mean, it ain't perfect, let's admit it, but at least they have rolled it out. I know they've been doing testing in districts in the US, but it hasn't been widely available. So in that respect, ACT might be a really good move for international students amidst the coronavirus.
Yeah.
And then also, you would love to kind of hear what you're advising year 11 students as far as testing goes right now.
I mean, our advice to year 11 students is that if you've got a bit of time on your hands, let's use it well. This is a good moment to start working on your standardized testing. Because of the cancellation of test dates, because of so many of these changes, anytime you have a change, a systemic change in the way a test is delivered or the expectations had been that certain test centers would be open on certain dates. With those changes, you're going to bring uncertainty, you're going to bring a certain degree of panic. The number of students who are going to be trying to take these tests, let's say on the August date, is going to be extraordinary.
Huge.
The College Board has already asked test center coordinators, at least here in the UK, to please let them know the absolute maximum capacity they could manage for August. So they are asking test centers to expand capacity where possible. But you're going to have now, a real logjam of students who, hoped they were going to test, March, May, June, who now are going to have to start testing in the fall. And then the class right behind them who anticipated testing in the fall, who still wish to test in the fall. We're actually encouraging kids to make that logjam worse by having younger kids also get ready to test as soon as possible. What I want students to do with this chance is be ready to take this test as soon as there is an available seat.
Right. And they have the time right now to actually do the work.
Right. You have the time. We don't know how it's going to work out, if they're going to start doing this online, if test centers really will expand the number of kids they can take. We've learned something really important from the coronavirus. Uncertainty, folks, is everywhere. So here's your chance. This is a chance to make the best you can out of a very uncertain situation. Never assume that things are going to go the way you expected them to go. Students who didn't study hard for their mocks in January are living to regret that deeply. Now that those mocks are going to be critically important to the grades that their teachers give them. It has always been incumbent upon all of us to do the best that we can all the time. And now more than ever, I think everybody has to live by that. So turn off the Netflix, you guys. Turn off those video games. Here we go. ACT.
Oh, this is it. So I'm gonna go to the Q&A now, and there's a question here that actually reminds me of a question that we got from another student in London, a high school student named Emma, who's asking about the SAT and ACT. Now that schools are going, test optional, and also because there's just fewer opportunities to actually take it, do we think that schools might be a little bit more lenient with their sort of score range boundaries as far as, who they're sort of admitting or letting in? Thoughts on that, Lisa?
I'm not convinced that they're going to be more lenient. Listen, they will always fill the class from the applicant pool. They'll fill the class. They're going to take what they want from that applicant pool. maybe a little more lenient if they're seeing that the scores are fundamentally depressed from what they've seen in the past, and then they're going to have to work with that. They're always going to be, pulling from the top of the pool as best they can. I wouldn't count on it though. I would study just as hard, if not harder, than you were studying before.
We have another question here from Ahmed, and his question is, how would the universities look at recommendations if we were not at school?
Well, the recommendations are drawn from teachers who have taught you either in your ultimate year of school or your penultimate year of school. So whether that's year 12 and year 13, or junior year and senior year, or première and terminale, whatever system you're in, you're always looking at those last 2 years. You still had school at least until February. So those teachers had plenty of time to get to know you in class. They now have a chance to get to know you in a different way. If you are learning online, you need to be, much as you might be sitting in your pajamas in your bedroom, you need to be attentive, you need to be on time, you need to be participating. I don't think it's going to change very much. I actually think they're still going to be looking at those recommendations, taking them very, very seriously, as they always have. And there's no reason for you, if you still are getting any kind of education from your school, not to keep doing the very best that you can. This, the online platform shouldn't be an excuse to slouch.
Right. There's another question here from a student named Felipe. Will schools that require subject tests take those tests more seriously? With a caveat, as you're thinking that, literally all the schools in America have made the subject tests optional. I shouldn't say all, excuse me. I say some of the schools that have traditionally really held onto the subject tests, like MIT, Caltech, these engineering schools, even Case Western with going to test score optional. So Lisa, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess all that I can say is that when you diminish the number of data points, every data point you have is more valuable.
Right.
So if they're getting less information, or information that they have less faith in, then whatever it is they do have is going to be more meaningful. So if you do have subject tests that are outstanding, I would have always recommended that you send those. Of course you should send great subject tests no matter what. You want to feed the universities an endless string of reasons to say yes to you. And if that's subject tests, great. But I genuinely don't think they penalize kids who don't have them. I really don't.
Got it. Well, look, we've gotten through our agenda points. We've gotten through, there's no more questions right now in the Q&A. So if there are no more questions, we'd love to sort of wrap up here, Lisa, on, what's the one thing that you think people must keep in mind during this time to help them stay calm about and admissions?
That universities absolutely will admit a class. Every year, the system is not collapsing. They're going to admit a class, both for this fall, a class that they've already rendered decisions on, and for the next year, that they will do everything in their power to make that educational experience in person. So to whatever extent that they can, they will do that. And they're going to great lengths to try to figure that out, to make sure that they can do that. And, if you keep trying, if you keep staying on board, doing the very best you can all the time, then you are doing the most that you can do. And so whatever the outcome is of this, it'll be what it'll be, but you'll never look back and say, I should have tried harder. That's what you want to avoid. You should always be trying as hard as you can.
Right, of course. I'm going to bring us back to the slides here for a second. I'll just simply, again, add my 2 cents with this, which is, again, I think the critical question is, how did you use your time during the coronavirus to stay on top of your studies, deepen your personal interests, try new things, and most importantly, help others in need? If you can address that question, you're going to be in good shape. So Lisa, thank you so much for joining us. This has been wonderful, incredibly informative. Much appreciated for you and your time and your expertise.
Thank you, Chris. It's been really, really enjoyable. Really enjoyed talking to you. I wish everybody all the best. Certainly, health and safety above all else.
Right. So on behalf of Lisa, Edvice London, the entire CATES team and community, we all want to wish you and your family, your friends, health and safety during this time. So thank you, and good night, and be safe. See ya.
Thanks.